Let's take this show on the road. Same-ish, different day. I'll be bored out my mind. Hometown, love my place.
Hey friends, let's dye some yarn. Today I will be dyeing 4 skeins of superwash merino in DK weight. And I will be soaking it in my rather large plastic tub here. You don't need one that's this big, you just need one that is large enough to soak your yarn properly. And I'm going to start by adding in about half a tablespoon of citric acid. And then I will add water. I'm just using cold water here. I got 2 liters. And another 2. And we're going to add 2 more. Just to make sure we have enough to soak everything. So I'm pouring another 2 liters here. There we go. And I'm adding it in. Next, we are going to open up the skeins. Such. I will be adding zip ties to each one. This will help them from tangling to each other, and it will also help to detangle them if necessary. And I'm using reusable zip ties that you can find on Amazon. That's 2. And we're going to do 1 more. Here we are. 3rd one. And the 4th one. So, now I'm going to move to the other side of the camera. I'm just grabbing my skeins by the zip ties. So, and we're going to add them into the tub. Here we go. And I'm pushing the yarn down into the water just to soak properly. You do not want any dry patches of yarn because the dye is not going to stick to the yarn if it's dry. I'm just pushing it down, helping it along the way. There we go. Now we're going to let that sit for at least half an hour and we'll be ready to dye. The yarn is soaked and ready to dye now. I'm going to be using a pan like this, a canteen. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to add more citric acid. I'm going to add about a tablespoon to the pan. I'll set that aside. Now I'm going to grab some water. I'm going to add 2 liters first into the pad. Like so. And then we're going to add our soaked yarn. I'll just grab it by the zip tie. Squeeze out a bit of the water. I'll make a huge mess. I place it in the pan, like so. Another skein, squeezing out the water. I'm placing it in the pan. I'm trying to place them next to each other to minimize the risk of tangling. Third skein. And fourth and final one. Now I got all the skeins in the pan. I'm going to add a little bit more water to it. Not too much. I don't want it to be a lot of bubbles where the dye can just take off. I want a more controlled dyeing environment this time. But I'm going to add a little bit. We are getting ready to add the dye. What I'm doing today is a Barbie inspired splash dyeing is my idea. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to twist the skeins slightly in the pan so that I get splotches all the way around. Just a little bit. I'm twisting a little from both ends. So, doesn't have to be a lot, just to make sure we get the dye all over. We're going to add a little bit more water to the pan. We're not going to cover everything. We want a little more than what we have now. Maybe a little bit more. There we go. And we are ready to start dyeing. Today we are going to be using Pro Chemical and Dyes Hot Pink. We are going to use Jacquard Acid Dyes Turquoise. And we are going to use purple. I've got a large spoon to poke the yarn with. Teaspoons to grab the dyes. Mask to protect my airways. Always you wear a mask when you're working with these dyes because it's a very, very fine powder and you don't want to breathe it in. I've got some gloves. And I've got an old empty yogurt container with water where I can just put my spoons when I'm done with them. So I'm going to move the camera a little bit and we're going to get started. We are getting ready to dye. Always put on your mask first. I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to start with the pink dye. I've also turned on the stove to heat the water. We're using these two lights. And it's a combination between the citric acid and the dye and the heat that will set the dye in the yarn. So I'm starting off with the pink, which looks like this. And I'm just going to make color splotches using the teaspoon here and there. Like painting with powder. A little more there. I'm going to start off with that. It's a very hefty pink. And I'm going to grab my big spoon to poke the dye in. Because we're not really looking for speckles now. We want more like blotches as if we spilt paint on the yarn. It's okay if there's a few speckles, but that's not the main objective. Here we go. And we're going to continue with the purple dye. Just spreading a little here and there. And again, I'm using the spoon to poke the dye into the yarn, making sure it dissolves in the water. There we go. And last but not least, I'm going in with the turquoise. And this color is infamous. It gets everywhere. It's like working with sparkles. It is. That's what it looks like. It is very, very powerful. One. And it does tend to get absolutely everywhere. So use cautiously. At the same time, this one is my favorite. Trying to hit mainly the white patches. You don't really want the colors to blend too much. Like I said, we want it to be like splashes of color. There we go. The water is starting to heat up now. I'm going in with a spoon. There will also be white patches in this yarn because I'm not working too hard on making sure the dye penetrates all the way through. So it will be a mixture of pink, purples, and turquoise and some white. So everywhere where the yarn is twisted or the bottom side, there will be white left as well. There we go. I'm going to turn down the heat a little bit. We are not looking for it to boil. We just want it to heat up properly everywhere. Now we'll be moving the pan about on the plates to make sure it's heated up everywhere. As you can see, the turquoise dye is very dominant. So handle with care. Don't splurge too much or it will be just turquoise. It's a lovely color though. It's my favorite. Water is starting to heat up. Careful to poke the yarn a little. To make sure we get hot water all over the pan. Don't want to poke it too much. Because I don't want the turquoise yarn dye to spread all over the pan. As you can see here we have the white parts as well, which is what we're looking for, and in between here. So if you want the dye to penetrate the yarn completely, you have to really work it down into the strands. As you can see here we get lighter parts as well, which is what I'm looking for now. If that's not what you want, you need to really get in there. I'm going to check if the water is starting to heat up in the pan. And I'm putting on a glove, and I'm simply poking it, putting my fingers down. It's starting to heat up here and there. And it needs to be hot everywhere. I got a cold patch here. And move pan. Everything needs to be heated properly. Otherwise the dye is not going to set, is not going to stick to the yarn. So we want to let it sit for a little while longer and we'll check again. I think I'm going to go for a little more pink in here. I'm really liking what I'm seeing, but I like some more pink. So I'm going to grab the pink dye again. Add in a little more here and there. After all, it is a Barbie inspired yarn. We can't go easy on the pink then, right? Needs to be a lot of pink. And I'm pushing it in, just to dissolve all the dye. This is not enough to penetrate the yarn, you need to work more for that. Really work it in there. There we go. We're continuing to heat up the pan. There we go. The water and the yarn is completely hot in the entire pan. So what we're going to do now is we are going to turn off the heat. And I'm going to set the pan aside and let it cool completely. And this is very important. You have to let it cool completely before rinsing. So I'm going to set it aside and do that. And I'll get back when it's time to rinse. The yarn has cooled off completely and we are going to rinse it. I'm using my plastic bowl in my sink. You can also rinse directly in the sink if you like, or in whatever you got. I'm using soak, which is my go-to for rinsing yarn. You don't have to have this. You can use dish soap, you can use conditioner, shampoo, whatever you got. I prefer soap though. So I'm going to pour in some water here so that the yarn has a little bit of space to move in the bowl while we're rinsing. I'm going to add a little bit more. There we go. Grabbing the zip tie, and I'll be squeezing out some of the water from the pan, mostly to not make a mess while transferring it to the rinsing bowl. Second skein. Third one. And as you can see, the water is completely clear in the pan, which means it has exhausted very well the dye. Might still be a little bit left in the yarn and on the zip ties, since we have used a lot of very strong colors. Go. I'm just pushing it down into the water. Trying to not distress it too much because I don't want it to tangle. There we go. And I'm going to find zip tie again. There we go. There's one, and I'm just dunking it a few times. Like so. I'm just squeezing out the water, not wringing it or using any force, just squeezing using my hands. You could also use a salad spinner or whatever you have handy. But I prefer doing this, just using my hands. Make sure to also rinse the zip ties. There may be dye stuck on them sometimes. And the last one. And we're squeezing out the water. And I'm just pouring out the water. And I'm going to go over it once more, just to make sure we get it as clean as possible. And we're adding some more water. A little bit more. You want the yarn to have some space to move. That should be fine. And we're adding the skeins back in. I'm trying to line them up somewhat next to each other. You really don't have to do this twice when you're using soap, but I prefer to do it. Just making sure. There we go. And we're dunking it a couple of times. Now squeezing out the water again. And again, without using force, just squeezing it. Rope skein. Just tangled a little bit here. I think it is tie-offs. Best way to detangle is actually to dunk it, like so. Just shift the tie and dunk. That will usually solve itself. There we go. And the last one. Here we go. Our Barbie inspired yarn is all done and ready to dry. I'm going to be putting it on a regular clothes rack. Just hang it to dry there. And it should be dry in a couple of days. It doesn't really get more Barbie inspired than that. I really love how this turned out. And I think I'm gonna knit something for myself with this yarn. It is such a lovely color. If you do try to dye this color too, let me know. Tag me on social media. I would love to see what you make. And also if you knit with it, tag me. I would love to see that as well. Thank you for following along, and I'll see you in the next one.